Right, before we get started, anything practical, let's talk about deciding your design. Now, it's absolutely fine if you want to freestyle to some extent and you decide as you go, perhaps you're not really sure yet, but you do need to make a few decisions. And that is overall what you're doing, because that impacts the prep you do. It's not to say that things won't change as you go along, because furniture can dictate that too sometimes, and you have to change and sort of modify your design. But essentially, you need to think about if you want to paint it all, you want to have bare wood with a design over it, or do you want a combination, large painted areas and revealed wood? There are two main ways that I prep furniture after cleaning, because there's always cleaning. The first is to strip back fully to the bare wood. My choice for doing that is paint stripper, as you'll see in the demos, because I largely work with veneer. I also find it much less labour intensive because you can go off and do other things while that's working. And the second way is to scuff sand the old finish. That means just literally to rough it up a bit. Stripping back fully gives you a beautiful, clean, raw wood surface to work on and refinish. Often reveals the beauty of the original wood as well. And never put a design over the existing finish, and nor really should you, unless you're doing it for a bit of fun, you don't mind the design maybe going wrong or not lasting well. I think it's best to take it off. So, masking tape design really needs to have the best chance to grip and look as fresh as possible and to be protected by a new finish. So let's get rid of those old finishes and start from fresh. For areas of our piece that we're going to paint, we actually don't need to remove the old finish. I don't know if you knew that. We don't need to go back to the bare wood to paint. We only need to scuff sand the old finish, which gives it a key and gets it ready to paint. As long as it's sound, that is. So if it's breaking up or it's got damage or scratches, we might need to do a bit of additional work to get it smooth first. On many of my pieces, I'll strip some areas, so the doors and the drawer fronts, and then I'll sand the top and the sides and the edges to be painted. So I'll be using the two techniques side by side. If you've got a design going over wood and you've got painted sections on the same area, on one panel for example, I'd suggest it's just easier to strip the whole thing. So take the finish off completely, start from fresh rather than trying to do the two prep techniques side by side. So that's the sort of basics. So it's whether we strip it back to the wood or we scuff sand the existing finish. So you can see, you do have to give it a little bit of thought ahead of what we're going to do. If you do want to get a bit more settled on your design now, I recommend taking a day aside to work on the 5-step design challenge. It really helps if you can't visualise your design. It takes you through the process of developing your ideas, if you're stuck with coming up with any at all. At a pinch, if you push for time, I suggest you go straight to day 4, because my big tip there is to get a really good straight photo of your piece, print it out with multiple copies on one sheet of paper, like a contact sheet. So I just draw over it with pens or pencils or even paint, and I can work out my design. Because it's printed lots of times, it allows me to scribble and mess about basically. So don't try and perfect each drawing, just play, try out different ideas and things will start to emerge. So it's a really good thing to do, to try if you're stuck, but you've got ideas. Remember really just to keep it simple as well though, because it's your first design. You can always get more complex and intricate as you gain experience and confidence as you go along. If you haven't got any ideas at all, I suggest you go to the first couple of days of the design challenge at the very least, because that helps you do exactly that. Similarly, if you're looking at a lot of furniture creations out there and feeling very wowed, or maybe overawed, or perhaps even intimidated or inspired, I suggest going and looking at day 1 and 2 again, because this is about pulling your own original ideas together. It guides you to look at other things outside of furniture and helps you to look at your own take on things, to come up with original ideas. We don't really want to be replicating other people's work and designs as a hard rule really. We need to respect the copyright of the artist. Unless it's a commonly seen design, you know, like wallpaper or stencil or a motif like stripes or hexagons that are just out there. You want to put your own spin on it if you're designing, so have a little look at those as I take you through a way to bring in other influences. That can then bring originality and personality into your work, and it gets you really excited to get creating. So there's a link to the mini course in the courses area. If you want to make it super easy for yourself right now though, you could take a look at the 5 designs you can create today. That's a step-by-step guide, and they are copyright copyable patterns that you can try. Another consideration, along with which areas you're going to reveal, paint, design over, etc., is are there any areas of repair? Anything you've repaired with, say, wood filler, things you need to disguise. So in the finishing touches in the final module, I'm going to show you how you can blend in filler with the wood grain. So you don't have to paint it. So it's not all lost if you've got wood damage. We can disguise it. But it's much better suited for small areas. So sort of rule of thumb, maybe 50p size sort of thing. because if you have a large area, it can be quite visible. But good to know, you don't have to paint completely if you've got small areas. So let's take another look at the designs I developed for this particular piece. The great thing about doing it this way is that your design's going to be in proportion and it will actually map correctly when you come to create it. I mean, that is, a godsend. I love to work like this because it just lets you work with the features and the symmetry of the piece, and it creates visually balanced designs generally if you're working with the actual piece itself. So let's have a look at the design I'll be creating in a bit more detail. Of course, I'm happy for you to take inspiration for this, by the way, but I do encourage you to come up with your own ideas and not totally recreate this because this is obviously one of my signature designs. So this is the end result of the design in mini course. This is the design board with the ideas set out ready to present and create. You can see previous designs of mine that is displayed alongside it with the colours, fittings, and also some mood sort of images. They set the vibe and the style for the piece overall, so it can be really good for communicating if you're sharing this with clients, for example. My design is based on an asymmetric split chevron design, so it goes up one side and back down the other, rather than a symmetrical zigzag, a bit like a lightning bolt, and it's all painted in rainbow metallic paints. So in the design, you'll see the top is whitewash, but I wasn't actually happy with the look of that stain on the wood when it came to it. As you can see, I adapted it later, so it was painted black at the top and the bottom as well. On the mood board, you can also see the handles, and then you can also see here that they changed a little bit when it came to the final choice. But overall, having a plan and design really helped me in visualising what I'm going to create. And it's a particularly useful approach, of course, if you're designing for someone else. Let's now move on to deciding a plan of attack to bring our designs to life.